As a gentlelady from Michigan, Ms. McClain, for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. And I would like to thank Mr. Rogers for giving me the opportunity to go on a CODEL and actually see the inventory of weapons that we are sending and just how they are getting from point A to point B and how we're tracking them. You know, that I can assure you raised my level of confidence. There is a saying, one look is worth 1,000 reports. But I want to shift gears for just a moment because although I think we're doing some things very well, I think we need a little bit of a reset with the American people, or I should just say my constituents in my district. They've been raising concerns with me about our involvement in this war. They're worried that we're getting dragged into a never-ending war with no clear and precise outcome that has been, in their opinion, right, or perceptions, 90% of reality, that has a clear end in sight. They believe that we're spending money and resources on a fight overseas rather than getting our own fiscal house in order. If you could, and anyone can answer, in simple terms, just lay out to the American people the reasons why it is so important for Ukraine to defeat Russia in this war, particularly from the eyes of the Americans. So what is the implications for the United States if Russia actually does defeat Ukraine?
I think the implications would be both in Europe and felt around the world. You know, the United States did get dragged into 2 world wars in Europe because aggressors weren't stopped. Aggressors, you know, initiated their conflict. The free world didn't hang together. Aggressors weren't deterred. They weren't stopped. And so the United States eventually was dragged into those conflicts. And we don't want to see that happening
so
again.
So it's a deterrent, and I don't mean to put words in your mouth, but it's more of a deterrent so we don't end up into a world war.
I think it is to demonstrate to other would-be aggressors that if they engage in the type of aggression that Russia has, they would face similar consequences. And I think it will matter very much, for example, if you're sitting in Beijing wondering about crossing the Taiwan Strait, you will ask yourself, if I do that, will the world react like they did when we went after and absorbed Hong Kong, which was to just kind of look the other way, or the way the world reacted in Ukraine? And if it is the latter, then aggression across the Taiwan Strait is a lot less likely.
And can you expand on that, sir, just a little bit more? What would a Russian victory or defeat mean for China?
Well, I think, first of all, Russia is China's closest ally. They, of course, signed a strategic partnership without limits shortly before the war. We have seen growing indications that China might be considering providing Russia with some assistance, lethal assistance, which would be very troublesome. So China has a stake in the outcome here. But also, I think China would, you know, they speak a lot about the importance of sovereignty and territorial integrity, but frankly, China would benefit greatly from a world that allowed big powers to gobble up their small neighbors.
And would you care to comment, what would the loss of Ukraine mean for NATO?
Well, first of all, Ukraine's not going to lose. There will be no loss of Ukraine. I think Vladimir Putin hoped that would happen. It's not. It hasn't happened. It's not going to happen. Ukraine continues to maintain most of its territory. They're fighting tenaciously. The Russians do not have the capacity, in my view, to take over Ukraine. But obviously, if they were to do so, it would position Russian forces and all the developments inside of Ukraine right on right on NATO's doorstep as it relates to Poland and the Baltic states, which is, I think, one of the reasons why you've seen Poland and the Baltic states so engaged in Ukraine.
And can you talk a little bit about the economic impact that would mean, or that would have on the United States?
Well, I think, you know, you've already seen that Russia's aggression, especially their what they've done to limit the ability of grain to get to global markets through the Black Sea, has already had an impact on global security writ large. Obviously, the energy instability, which is generated by the war, has also had an economic consequence. So I think the war is already having significant consequences because of Russia's aggression. And had it been unchecked, I think those consequences would have been worse.
And we'd have been farther along. Thank you. With that time, I yield back, Mr. Chairman.
Chair now recognizes the gentlelady from